I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: which was better, 1984 or Brave New World? And the reason I'm asking this question is because in the last couple of weeks I've gone back and I've reread both books, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and 1984 by George Orwell. And it's interesting to go back and reread them again, and just in regards to where we're at in society. And it got me thinking, well, which one of these books perhaps was better, or which one of them actually prophesied a more accurate vision for what the future of humanity would look like. I don't think it's really fair to say that either one of these books is like superior to the other. There are things that they both get right and things that aren't quite right, and as far as sort of if you're going to treat them as a dystopian prediction about what the future of the world might look like. And they are both just excellent pieces of literature in that regard. You can't really say one is just inferior and terrible and the other one's really, really good. They are both good books. And if you haven't read them, you really should read them both. But here's the thing. They do really make two different predictions, and they do focus in on two different ideas about what the future of society might actually look like. Now, 1984, first of all, an interesting little fun fact about 1984 is that it wasn't actually going to be called 1984 initially. It was initially called 1980, and then it became 1982, and then finally it became 1984. And apparently that was because of the time that it took George Orwell to actually complete his manuscript for this book. So the actual date in which the story takes place was shifted out as a result of that. So I don't know if it would have had as catchy a title if it was 1980. I guess it would if it was 1980. It wouldn't make much difference in 1982, but for some reason 1984 just seems to roll off the tongue. Or maybe we're so used to hearing it that it just seems to roll off the tongue. But a very simplistic reading of this book would be to say, oh, this is all about state surveillance. It's about an overly intrusive state that controls its people through the use of, Big Brother and this technology that's constantly watching you. I think that's a very superficial reading of 1984. The surveillance, yes, it's a big part of it, but when you look at Big Brother, particularly the scenes where Winston is captured, and what happens in those jail cells, people are still blindly following the instructions that they are being given by Big Brother, even though there is no reason for them to be doing that. There actually is no reason at that point to keep up the pretense, but they still do. Why? Because they are so thoroughly indoctrinated and controlled. And that's really the heart of what this book is about, I think. It's about this idea of truth. What is truth? Does it matter? And freedom. And what does it mean to actually be free? And so the whole idea of truth, this is a world in which truth has become so totally relativized and subjectivized that you've got a state that actually changes the truth regularly. They have a whole ministry that's devoted to actually propagating lies in order to propagate their version of the truth. They will change history. They will change facts because they don't suit the truth. And so it's not just a matter of denying or pretending certain inconvenient truths. It's a matter of convincing an entire population that the truth is actually a lie, that the truth is not real. This is really a warning about subjectivism and relativism and where these kind of things can lead. And then corresponding with that, we also have this question of what is authentic freedom. It really, reading this book again, it's really reminiscent to me of that quote from Viktor Frankl, that the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And at one point you do think to yourself, Winston is going to remain free. No matter what they do to him at the end, he is going to be truly free. But that's not really how things work out in the end. And there's that sort of sense of this is what a world would look like if people lost sight of what authentic freedom was and they surrendered like everything. Like we've had evil and oppressive ideologies and regimes in the past that have embraced a lie and done evil things to people and just controlled people's lives in just vile and awful kinds of ways. Nazism, communism. But in this book, Orwell is really saying, imagine a regime where they actually got you to embrace the lie, not just to live with it and accept it and sort of quietly resist, but the lie is so pervasive that it consumes you and you submit yourself totally to the lie, even though you have the possibility of remaining free. So Viktor Frankl's idea is that even in a Nazi death camp, you can still be free. Even if you're a Jewish person who is about to be sent off to the gas chambers, you still have this interior freedom, this interior life that they can never own you. This is an idea that is really strong, again, in things like, for example, Christianity, the idea of, don't be afraid of people who can destroy the body because they can't destroy your soul. So you've got nothing to fear from that. So there's that sense of you still have that freedom as a person, even in those awful situations. And Orwell's sort of really saying, well, what would happen if you totally surrendered that? What would happen if an ideology became so pervasive that they corrupted the truth and made you believe lies like 2 + 2 = 5, and you really truly believe that? Then all of a sudden, what would happen to your freedom? Would you just acquiesce and surrender to that? And like I said, it's a little bit more of a bleaker ending because you have the sense of, maybe Winston's going to do it, but not so much. The interesting thing about this book is that when it was actually written, the technology did not exist for Big Brother to be a reality. But what is so intriguing now is that, and probably why this book is more prescient than ever, is because in actual fact we now have the technology thanks to the internet, and it's the way we are using that technology probably more than anything else, and the way we are surrendering ourselves quite willingly often to that technology that actually leaves us vulnerable to a lot of the themes and ideas, the dangers that are presented to us at 1984. So for example, the way in which we now outsource memory and outsource knowledge. We don't sort of learn so much for ourselves, we just rely on Google. I'll outsource all of that important memory and knowledge about, and wisdom in particular. What is wisdom? It's knowing important things about important things. And so we're very isolated. We don't live particularly communal lives. It's the only way you can really gain wisdom is by being around people who have lived a bit longer. If we live very individualistic lives, it's hard to get wisdom. If we don't learn and read history and know stuff and actually possess it in our memory, it's just outsourced to Google. So I'll go and look up a fact or a point of history when I need to. Otherwise, I'm not really going to be too bothered. Then you really are vulnerable to this idea of this pernicious state and this pernicious ideology that could actually corrupt you and lead you into very, very serious error and evil. And so the technology exists now for this to become a lot more possible. But as I said, I think it would be a very simplistic reading of this book, and often people do, to say that the main focus is really Big Brother. It's not really at all. Big Brother is a component of the story as a plot device. The real heart of it is about truth and about authentic human freedom. So that's 1984. For my money, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, I think, is a book that actually is a more accurate depiction of the world we currently find ourselves living in. It's a world where people have willingly and continue to willingly surrender their freedom to hedonism and self-gratification, and they are caught up in a stupor of power that has been given to them through technology, and like it's almost like a willful ignorance. They're stuck in this shallow, vacuous, superficial pleasure seeking, and the authorities really understand this, and they know that this is a powerful mechanism for controlling the world. And I think this, for my money, is a more accurate depiction of where things are at now. You have a lot of individuals who are, particularly in the West, who live very individualistic lives. It's about hedonism and pleasure-seeking and self-gratification, not so much about self-giving, not so much about giving yourself to community and making certain sacrifices, not about a life of virtue. It's about, as one of my old workmates used to say, I'm not here for a long time, I'm here for a good time. And that really is sort of Brave New World. And it's interesting the way in which technology features in this novel as well, but the technology is different, and I think there is a more insightful exploration and commentary on technology and the way it changes the human person in this novel as opposed to 1984. In 1984, the technology is there. It's a sort of a mechanism of the state, of the evil ideology. But in this one, people have actually willingly enslaved themselves, and it's the technology that has allowed them to do that. Effectively, Francis Bacon's idea, knowledge is power, and we will free ourselves from the constraints of nature with what knowledge will give to us. Well, it's kind of, in a lot of ways, you can look around the world now and say that we haven't really found that freedom at all. There's certain things that technology has given to us that has advanced disadvantaged us. But in a lot of ways, I think about, for example, internet technology and social media and stuff like that. How many of us wish we could actually liberate ourselves from that stuff a bit more and spend more time in the real world? And how many of us wish that we could actually free ourselves from so many of the demands of the working life and the way in which technology impacts that, brings to us, so we could actually form meaningful bonds with people around us? How many people are about to start falling victim to technology that's going to take their jobs, and they're not going to be able to find other meaningful work because they're not necessarily skilled enough to be able to find those jobs anymore, because we now do everything with automation and self-checkout and everything else like that. So I think this book is more prescient. It really gets to the heart of how technology can very easily dehumanize us if technology is not married to some important ethical truth. And if you don't have ethical truth governing the use of technology, then there's a very real danger that you end up with a society like this. And it's really this idea, they think they've solved the world's problems, and they think they're very they are like elitist, and they've got it all figured out, and they know, they are the high and mighty, and those those savages, what do they know, with their horrible, outdated traditions. In actual fact, you would have to say that the savages are living, despite their deficiencies, are living a more authentic human experience. They are more in touch with the fullness of the human experience than these people who live a very superficial and vacuous life looking down on everyone else. And so they've become enslaved by their hedonism, by their technology. It actually hasn't made them free. It has dehumanized them, and it hasn't solved any problem at all. This is not true freedom that they've found. For me, 1984 is a little bit less hopeful in its ending. It's definitely a more of a bleaker ending, whereas Brave New World, there is a sense, because of the way the world of this book is structured, that people could rediscover the truth, that people could break free, that it is possible. And so there's sort of a more of a, I feel anyway, more of a hopeful note in this book. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts though, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. There's a link in the description below and a link on screen at the end of this video. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.